If you were asked, do you believe in ghosts? Most people would probably answer saying they aren't sure. But the truth is that almost every culture in the world has some belief in ghosts. This has been evident through history. A recent Gallup poll indicated that more than half of all Americans do believe in ghosts. But of course, it's equally true to say that science can provide very little evidence to prove the existence of actual ghosts. With poltergeist activity, however, it's a very different story, with so many ordinary people witnessing the phenomena. Throughout the world and down through history, poltergeist activity occurs in much the same or very similar sequence of events. A haunting always starts with noises, usually tapping noises, quiet at first, but then building up to loud rapping and banging. The next thing to occur are usually small pools of water, spontaneously appearing on the floor and other surfaces around the house. The strange thing about these pools is that they're always neat and symmetrically shaped and never have splashes. After this, the activity can take various forms and increase in intensity and develop into a real haunting. One of the most remarkable cases on record was the well-documented case that the press called the Black Monk of Pontefract and happened in Yorkshire, England in 1966. It all began on an ordinary June morning at number 30 East Drive, Pontefract. That Thursday was warm and summery, and the Pritchard family were all home in the back garden of number 30 enjoying the sunshine. Joe Pritchard, his wife Jean, and their two children, Philip aged 15 and Diane aged 13, were sunbathing. But Gran, Mrs. Sarah Scholes, had gone indoors, out of the sun, and was sitting in the lounge, happily knitting a cardigan. It was the family in the garden who noticed the tapping noise first and in the beginning tried to ignore it. However, after a while, Joe sent young Philip inside to investigate. Philip, trying to follow the noise, wandered in through the kitchen and entered the lounge, where he met the strangest sight. Mrs. Scholes, his gran, was sitting knitting in a shower of grey-white powder, raining gently down on her. She had been so absorbed in her knitting that she hadn't noticed the powder shower until Philip walked in and made her look up. Once she saw it, she reacted as most grans would, with a 15-year-old grandson.
"Philip,"
she accused.
"what mischief have you been up to now?"
But, even as she spoke, she realised her grandson could not possibly have been responsible, because the top of the room was completely clear. The shower of powder began around 4 feet from the ground. When Mrs. Scholes went to the kitchen to get a dustpan and brush, she found the floor covered in pools of water, and the tapping noises were getting louder. She called her daughter Jean, and together they mopped up the water, only to find it kept reappearing. They got Joe and Philip to pull up the liner, thinking the water was coming up through the floor, only to find the concrete floor was as dry as a bone. Joe returned to the back garden to turn off the water stopcock, noticing as he did so that his daughter, Diane, was taking absolutely no interest in the quite unusual proceedings going on all around her. For the rest of the day, pools of water kept mysteriously appearing in the kitchen, and the rapping noises grew louder and louder. Joe and Philip spent most of the night trying to track down the rapping noises, but they always seemed to come from the next room or somewhere else, completely untraceable. The next morning, Jean contacted the local water authority, who spent some time inspecting drains and checking for broken pipes, all to no avail. Eventually, they offered the rather lame excuse that it must be condensation, and left in rather a hurry. Over the next few weeks, things became almost unbearable for the Pritchard family. Apart from the noises which were now occurring mainly at night, objects started to move around the rooms. Ornaments, flower pots, eggs, and even cups of tea would disappear and be found later somewhere completely different. More disturbing still, strange things started appearing. At first, it was just small stones or pebbles raining down on the kitchen roof, which is a well-known and documented poltergeist phenomenon. However, one day, While Jean was cleaning out the kitchen grate, a multitude of old keys rattled down the chimney, some hitting her on the head. The collection included every key in the house, but also a number of very old keys that nobody had ever seen before. From then on, the haunting increased to include crockery and plant pots being broken, and an increase in the noise until a crack appeared in the bedroom ceiling. Electric lights switched themselves on and off at the wall and at the main switchboard, which was inside a locked cupboard. Then, one night, just as the vicar who had come to visit to offer spiritual comfort and guidance was leaving, their prized grandfather clock fell from the landing and smashed to pieces by the front door. The vicar promised to return, but never did. Much of this activity had been witnessed by policemen, newspapermen, the local Member of Parliament, and several priests, all of whom advised the Pritchards to leave the house immediately. But the Pritchards are of stubborn Yorkshire stock and steadfastly refused, vowing to stay and beat this thing. The local newspapers had the story and initially named the phenomena Mr. Nobody, but the Pritchard family, possibly in an effort to normalise the situation, gave the entity the name Fred. Although the haunting went on for a long time, it really came to a climax when the ghost began to show itself. At first, it was a tall, dark figure seen briefly at night or in a bad light, and Fred even seemed to have a sense of humour. One time when, at the vicar's suggestion, the family had an evening of singing hymns and religious songs in an effort to move Fred out, but Fred joined in by making a large pair of fluffy gloves appear to be conducting the singing. The next day, the gloves were still in the lounge, and Mrs. Scholes picked them up with the fire tongs, took them out into the back garden, doused them with paraffin, and burnt them. Then, one day the humour stopped, and everything changed while Jean was standing at the sink peeling potatoes. Suddenly, she recounted later, the hair on the back of my neck began to stand up, and I knew there was someone, or something, standing directly behind me. She turned around and found herself face to face with a very tall figure, dressed in a black monk's habit with a cowl covering his face. The figure looked quite solid, and oddly enough she felt no alarm or fear. Then, the monk simply vanished before her eyes, seemingly sinking into the floor. After this, the family saw the monk on numerous occasions, and the local press were prompted to look up old records in the library, and what they discovered was very interesting. It was revealed that way back in the reign of Henry VIII, the monk had been found guilty and later executed for the SA and murder of a young girl. So the conclusion was that the tormented spirit of the monk, now dubbed the Black Monk of Pontefract, was still wandering the earth on the site of his death. The last serious incident in the case occurred soon after and seemed to confirm everything that had been discovered about the Black Monk from the records. Late one evening, as Diane was going to bed, the lights went out all over the house, and Diane began to scream. When the family ran to her assistance with a torch, they saw an incredible sight. Diane was being dragged up the stairs by an invisible force. Her cardigan was being stretched out in front of her, as if being pulled by strong, yet unseen hands. She was also, it seemed, being held by the throat as her screams soon turned to choking gasps. Her father, mother, and brother grabbed hold of Diane and pulled, and after a considerable struggle, all four of them fell back down the stairs as the invisible force gave up. Diane had bright red marks, which would later turn to severe bruises on her throat in the strangle position. Once they had pulled themselves together and revived Diane with a large glass of brandy, the family decided enough was enough and moved out of the house to stay with relatives. After this, the hauntings which had occurred over 9 months faded away quite quickly and disappeared altogether. We could conjecture that with young Diane, who had obviously been the focus in this case, Away from the house, the Black Monk no longer had an earthly energy source to operate from. Eventually, the Pritchard family went home, repaired the crack in the bedroom ceiling, cut the grass, trimmed the neglected hedges, and generally got on with their lives, like the good Yorkshire people they were. Today, 30 East Drive is the focus of many paranormal investigations where multiple incidents have been recorded on camera. The following footage was recorded within the walls of 30 East Drive by Alison from Haunted Horizons. I first came across this footage on Beardo's Weirdos YouTube channel, so I thought I'd take a look at the video myself, and I was quite surprised by what I saw. Alison has kindly given me permission to use this clip, so I'd like to say thank you to Alison, and I'll link her channel in the video description down below. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that this was definitely the work of the Black Monk of Pontefract or any other ghosts who may or may not inhabit 30 East Drive, but to me, this doll definitely looks to have been pushed by an unseen force. Have a look for yourself and let me know what you think in the comments section.
The only way I'm going to know you're here is if you make a sound. Or you light one of these lights up. Can you do that for me? That's just natural building sound, I think. There's a bit of a tap up there. That's me creaking as well, by the way, if you're wondering what that noise is. If you're going to make a sound, it's got to be a loud one. There's a doll at the top of the stairs there. She should be in the bedroom. Oh my God. Oh my God. She should be in the bedroom. Oh my God. Oh my God. Guys.